Hello, my friends. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So happy you're here. All right, awesome. We're recording. All right, so it's 7 o'clock and we're going to get started. So welcome everyone. And this is week 2 of Spirit Guided Fitness. And this week is called Fight, Flight, Freeze, Undoing the Addiction and Becoming Unconditional. It's a really timely topic. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to be having some slides. So we're going to see the slides come up. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Just breathing in and breathing out. So while this is loading, we'll practice a breath practice. And this breath practice, we'll go over it again in our presentation. And it's got 3 parts to it. It's called a deep, soft, and delicious breath. The deep refers to letting the first couple of breaths find their way like down into the organs, into the viscera, into the pelvic bowl, into the belly. So we take a couple of deep breaths to start. And deep also means that we allow the mid-body, the ribs, to open with the inhale. That deep breath also feels like we're breathing into the armpit. So even underneath the arms receives the breath, and the breath even finds its way into the clavicles and into the upper chest. So the deep, soft breath begins with that powerful depth. So take a couple of breaths, maybe if you are able to, please close your eyes. Take a couple of slow, deep breaths and let your breath come all the way down into your viscera, into your organs. Let the breath press against the spine, opening up even the back ribs, right above the crest of the pelvis where your kidneys and adrenals are. Let the breath open up the shoulder blades. Excellent. The second aspect of the breath is a soft breath. And the softness has to do with the area of our heart. So eyes closed, if you can. And let the area of your heart soften. Just let the area of the heart soften and allow the breath to come in and out through that soft heart. And I actually ask that you imagine the heart as like a really lovely, fragrant, soft dough, piece of dough. And in the center of the piece of dough, it would be as if you just gently kneaded the dough and you made like a small indentation in the dough in the center. And that place in your heart is where the breath is received, just softly, just with such a pleasant ease to it. So take a couple of those beautiful, soft, delicious breaths. In and out of the heart. That's it. And then the third aspect of this breath that we're doing is the delicious part. And the delicious part has to do with energy. So picture your cupped hands or an empty vessel. And into this empty vessel is poured like the love or the joy. Think of something that you just love. Think of someone you love, or a way of feeling that just feels so good to you. And this energy is just pouring into this vessel. The deliciousness of that idea and that feeling is just coming into this vessel. And we're going to lovingly tip this vessel into the softness of the heart. And we're going to take that deep breath into the softness of the heart, and it's going to drink in this delicious, nourishing, loving feeling and the innate intelligence of the heart just distributes that goodness all through the body, through the trillions of cells that comprise this community called the body. So deep, soft, and delicious breath is the passport out of the fight, flight, freeze, addictive energy that we're going to be talking about today. if you would like, open the eyes and just softly let yourself, baby animals are like such a beautiful way to shift energy. And these baby lambs, just feel with your mind imagination how soft does a baby lamb's ear feel when you pat it. Just look at that sweet little baby lamb. Just let yourself relax. Beautiful. Okay. Oopsie. Fight, flight, freeze is something I think we've all heard about. It seems to be talked about more and more. And fight, flight, freeze refers to an energy system. It's a quality of our autonomic nervous system. So the fight, flight, freeze response isn't something that you consciously, purposely do. It is a survival mechanism that enabled the species called human and animal species to be able to survive a threat. And that is a very useful thing. And it has a wonderful purpose when we are in an actual threat, when we perceive a threat. I was thinking, if you're driving in your car and you see a car ahead of you hit ice and start to spin, that's an instance in which, completely rightfully, what a good thing that our system can shift very quickly into fight, flight, and freeze. And in that shift, our consciousness begins to narrow its focus. So instead of feeling expansive and open, our consciousness narrows into three essential elements. And those elements that it focuses on exclusively are the protection of the body, the surveying of the environment, like the awareness of what's going on peripherally nearby, and the element of time. If, for instance, we were a deer, and it's here where I live, it's hunting season. So if we were deer and we were out in the wild and we heard that twig snap, you would notice the deer gets very still, right? It goes into a freeze response because it's deciding based on what happens in its environment, whether it's going to run, whether it's going to stay still. And deer don't really have a fight response, but it's trying to decide how much time do I have to reach safety. So would I be better off staying totally still or running? And the wonderful thing about the example of, watching animals, how animals respond, is that as soon as that perceived threat is, realized not to be a threat at all, it was just a twig snapping, very shortly that deer is back grazing again. It's just back doing its thing. And the fight, flight, freeze system that the nervous system created dissipates and releases, and everything calms down. In we humans, we actually activate our fight, flight, freeze nervous system by thought alone. Back when we were cavemen and cavewomen, we did escape saber-toothed tigers, and we were being chased by woolly mammoths, and we needed that fight, flight, freeze in order to actually escape physical threat. And for most of us watching this webinar today, that's not our reality. We're not being pursued by a Tyrannosaurus Rex. However, we are experiencing fight, flight, freeze a lot. And we're experiencing it not because of a threat out there, but because we have a thought about something that hasn't even happened, or something that happened a long time ago. And just by thinking about it, we send our system into this chemical state. And the elements of this chemical state, what the physiology of it. And here, we can see this person in this picture looking at their phone. And what's going on in the physiology of that person who she looks a little stressed. So what's going on in her physiology? Well, if she's reading something and it's making her feel upset, and she's feeling that constriction in her viscera, and she's feeling that fight, flight, freeze, her throat starts to get a little tight. She's feeling fearful. She's projecting that something bad is going to happen. Her system is beginning to take all the blood flow and sends the blood flow into her extremities, into her arms and legs. Because if she were actually being chased by a predator, that's where all the energy would need to be for her to run or to fight. So that means that whatever she might have eaten, her digestive system doesn't get any energy, because you don't need to digest things if you're trying to run away. So whatever she's digesting, the body says, well, let's just store that as fat for now. And when this body calms down, we'll come back to that and we'll use that fat later. So the digestion stops, fat gets stored. The reproductive system, don't need that. We're trying to make sure that we live to see another day. The energy of the reproductive system, that shuts down. Immune system, don't need that. We're trying to make sure that we don't, We're not the one that gets eaten. We don't need the immune system. Take all the energy out of the immune system. Don't need that. Creativity, higher reasoning, the ability to project and see beyond this moment. Don't need that. Brain is an enormous consumer of oxygen. Shut down all the regions of the brain other than the ones that govern that reactivity, that split-second decision-making reactive mind. Everything else, let it go. So what happens physiologically just by looking at our phone and reading something that feels threatening? We affect our entire energetic system, and we take all the expansion of this amazing consciousness that we are, this pure energy, and we condense it, we narrow it into matter. We go from energy to matter. That's what happens in fight or flight. And when we go from energy to matter, we go into the only things that matter are the body, the environment, and time. And that is the nature of being a meat suit. That's the experience of being a meat suit. It is the inherent nature of that is a feeling of threat, because we feel very vulnerable. We're very reactive. We've let go. We've lost our awareness of our fullness, and we found ourselves suddenly in this very narrow focus. As I was researching for this presentation, I wanted to confirm what I have heard, which is that 90% of all doctors' visits are stress related. I wanted to just make sure that if I were to say that was actually the case. And I did find an article that confirmed that is so. And as I was just saying, what happens when we go into fight, flight, freeze? The immune system shuts down, the digestive system stores all of the things that we're eating as fat. Our higher reasoning shuts off. Our reproductive system shuts down. All the energy is going to the extremities. It leaves the organs and the viscera. So when you think about how those resources are being redistributed and the really important vital functions are no longer receiving any energy, it starts to make a lot of sense that a lot of the things that get us feeling not well would come from the fight, flight, freeze response. And unlike the deer, that 10 minutes after the deer realizes it was just a twig, it goes back to its restore, growth, and repair. We don't do that. we seem to roll from one perceived threat to the next. And then once that perceived threat has been realized to be unfounded, perhaps, maybe we'll go back into that growth, rest, and repair for a little while, and then we get triggered again. And the reason this is our topic, at the beginning of this journey, is that this is a habit. It's an addiction. It's an unconscious habit. And when we begin to see how much of our experience is being shaped by this experience, this response, it's an autonomic response, meaning you don't control it. You can simply notice it, and you can shift into the other autonomic response of growth, rest, and repair. Once we start noticing how much of our experience is in fight, flight, or freeze, and how in fight, flight, or freeze, since we have gone from that expanded spirit self into that narrow, constricted matter self, we're going to want to release that addicted, habitual fight, flight, freeze response. We're going to want to start to let that go. And that's why we're looking at it right here at the beginning of our journey. I heard Eckhart Tolle, who is a person who wrote a book called The Power of Now, and who embodies the qualities when you hear him speak and even read his book. He has the energetic quality of eternity and infinity. You feel the spaciousness of his being. And I heard him describe stress as this gap between what is and what the mind says should be. So stress, 90% of all doctors' visits are precipitated by stress. Stress, which, is the trigger for the fight, flight, freeze response. Stress is a thought that evaluates what is. I'm looking at my email, and then my mind says, that shouldn't be. That person shouldn't be. That situation shouldn't be. And just based on that alone, we create this gap, this chasm. And we find ourselves spending a large part of our life experience in that gap, trying to get comfortable, like trying to figure out how to be okay with this gap. How do I make friends with this experience of, I see something, I think it shouldn't be, and I want to figure out, well, how can I live that way? And what we end up doing is we end up staying in a pretty much constant state of fight, flight, and freeze, trying to understand or trying to negotiate with stress. So stress is an addiction. And let me go back to that slide. Hold on. So stress is an addiction, and we are interested in becoming unconditional. Unconditional meaning we in spirit guided fitness, we're practicing uncoupling the what is from the what should be. So in spirit guided fitness, rather than diving right into that narrow focus, we are invoking and practicing staying in an expanded energy. Let's use our deep, soft, and delicious breath right now. I've given you a lot of information. So one thing that we can do when we notice that we're starting to feel either overloaded or saturated, we can balance our energy by our breath. So here we go. If you're able to, please close your eyes, and you're not always going to be able to close your eyes, but just while we're practicing this for the first few times, it really helps to let go of perception, visual perception. So just, if you can, close your eyes. And using just your feeling, deepen your breath and let yourself feel that deep breath move down into the organs. Feel the breath in the rib cage. Feel the breath behind the heart. Feel the breath inside of the shoulder blades. So let the breath actually be so full and deep that it puffs out your shoulder blades. Beautiful. That's beautiful. And soften now. Let the breath come into the heart. Knead that fragrant softness so that there's a little space there where the breath can be received. So just softly breathing in and out through the heart. That's it. Very good. Start to get creative here with the delicious part. Like I picture baby animals sometimes, or the softness of, cashmere, or the deliciousness of, being together with friends. I allow any experience that just invokes that good feeling. I just well it up, and I allow it to just pour gently into a vessel, as if I could translate those feelings into like honey and have it just drip into this vessel. And then I can feed it directly to my softened heart. Like there are places in nature that when I'm thinking about being there, when I'm there and thinking about being there, I can feel the goodness. I can just feel that peace. And so sometimes I will just think about a forest and I can let that just go right into my heart. And I want you to know that when you take that kind of conscious care, you are setting in motion a unfolding that, yes, it is the growth, rest, and repair nervous system, but it's more. So you're so powerful. You're so, you have such dominion. You're so capable. You're so able that you can shift from this narrow focus to this expanded, open awareness. When we shift, when we make that shift, the elements of the body, environment, and time fall away. When you make a shift like that, and let's say you're on a walk and you just begin, as you're breathing and walking, you're just breathing that deep, soft, delicious breath. And you begin to overcome the body, the environment, and time. You are entering that flow state that athletes have called the zone. It's a meditative state. It's a expanded state that is truer to your reality as energy. And that's why it feels so good. And that's why even now as I'm speaking this, you are having the feeling, remembering of that state. Like you're probably already accessing the times that you experience that state because it's that powerful. It's a signature of your reality as spirit. Spirit guided fitness is a conscious invocation of your reality as an activity. So you're just outgrowing an addiction or a habit called fight, flight, freeze. You're not getting rid of it because it is helpful, as in the car in front of you starts to spin on ice and your system goes automatically into a response that is its greatest form of care in that moment. And when you and your car come to a stop, what you may notice is the breath pattern of fight, flight, freeze is a very shallow and fast breath. The opposite of our deep, soft, and delicious breath. So it's a fast, shallow breath. You might notice that. You might notice clammy hands or sweat. You might notice that a trembling feeling from the release of adrenaline and cortisol both incredibly helpful reactive energies, hormones. Those are so helpful and appropriate. When we receive those cascades of hormones, the adrenaline and the cortisol, and over and over and over again, you know, the email, the phone call, the breaking news, you know, one of our children, when we experience a never-ending stream of adrenaline and cortisol, it breaks our system down, and we experience fatigue. There's a lot of chronic stress patterns that have all kinds of names nowadays. There's so many names for ways in which chronic stress has shown up. And that's just because we have not realized what it's costing for us to not live in our truth. Because that narrow focus, while it's really helpful in specific situations, isn't your truth. And if it were your truth, it wouldn't make you sick. Your truth, our reality is spirit. It's expansion. It's openness. Let me just check on the time. Okay, so we got a little more time. Okay. We have choices. Our choices are, we can change from the outside in, as I have here, motivation and behavior, or we can make shifts from the inside, from our intuitive knowing. And those shifts from our inspired intuitive knowing, their first manifestation is the way we feel. I'll give you a scenario. You go to the doctor for your checkup, and the doctor says, you are exhibiting some signs of chronic stress. You've got your blood pressure might be a little high. You might be gaining weight, and you might have a little back pain. You might be experiencing tension, and so your back has a little pain to it, chronic back pain. So your doctor suggests that you begin a regimen of walking. And for some of us, there are two ways that experience shows up. So one way, the doctor tells us, I'd like to see you start walking. We do it because we're afraid that if we don't do it, we'll get sicker, and we don't want to, the doctor said so, and we feel defeated, and we feel a little embarrassed or ashamed because we're not taking care of ourselves and all that stuff. So we get out there and we force ourselves to walk, or we join a boot camp and we let somebody else force us to walk. And while we are taking the action that the doctor suggested, you know, while our body is actually doing what the doctor said, which is to walk, what's happening energetically is that we're still in fight, flight, and freeze. We are perhaps in our minds the whole time we're walking or we're in the boot camp fitness class. In our mind, we're either complaining, we're bored, we are listing grievances, we're preoccupied with our to-do list, or we're fearing the things that aren't getting done while we're in the class or we're out on the walk. So that's the matter model. I'm a body in space and time, and I've got to make this body do the right thing in order to be well. That's the matter model. The other way, the spirit-guided fitness, the way spirit-guided fitness is, you know, suggesting, and this is what we're here to play with, is to allow ourselves to begin with the feeling rather than begin with the behavior or even thinking about what to do. We want to start with how we want to feel. So perhaps if we start with how we want to feel, like the first thing that pops into our mind is, you know, I want to get a pair of bright orange walking shoes because I love that color and it's so happy. And if I put on those bright orange shoes, I will just feel excited about going for a walk. I love that feeling. And you know what else? I have a friend who's been asking me to go for walks, and I always say I'm too busy. I'm going to call my friend and see if my friend would like to walk with me once a week. Maybe my friend knows some really fun places to walk. And just in that shift of how do I want to feel? Like, I've already I'm a little excited. The energy of this idea of walking has suddenly started to open up. Like, I got my orange shoes. I love my orange shoes. And I get to look forward to walking with a friend who knows some really beautiful places to walk. And I get to enjoy those places. And suddenly I'm out walking and I have lost all sense of body, of time, and environment. I'm in the zone. I'm in love. If I had to say where, I'm in love. And in that place, like if we were to, you know, just zoom in while you are in that experience, and we were to tune into your breath pattern and into your chemistry at that moment, we would find that you are naturally experiencing full, generous, nourishing breath. That's what we would find. We would also find that the systems of the body are in harmonious conversation. They are, everything is speaking fluently to everything. Now, that also means that the places like, let's say I have a tweaky back. Let's say my back is chronically tweaky. I am in my right mind and I begin to get sort of some intuitive nudges about ways in which I can take care of my back and enjoy my walking. It might be that I start doing a couple of specific things just for my back. It might be that I make sure that I have the right shoes for my back, or I begin to receive spirit guided, intuitive knowing. I happen to run into a person who points me in the direction of a book or a healthcare practitioner. So when I'm operating as my wholeness, the information, energy comes in all forms. There's a wholeness to the information that I receive. When I'm in stress, I showed this slide before. I just wanted to use it as a punctuation mark about fight, flight, and freeze. So stress, the gap between what is and what my mind is saying should be, is a form of rejection. It's rejecting. It's resisting. It could be called hating. That's when I'm in that stress, I'm rejecting what is. I'm not allowing it to be. And a water crystal that's exposed to I hate takes a very odd, out of balance or unharmonious shape. And it's the same with our energy. When we are in that resistance, or we feel that dis-ease of being in between, that in that stress gap, we're trying to bridge these two states of here's what's actually happening and here's my rejection of it. We feel dis-ease. We don't feel ease. And when we are able to, using our natural abilities as energy, and as easily as we deeply, softly, and deliciously breathe, just that easily. And I'm not kidding. The deer goes from twig snap, fight, flight, freeze, back to calmly grazing by returning its breath. We can easily go from that dis-ease to the breathtaking beauty, that exquisite goodness, that good feeling of appreciation and love, simply by shifting our breath. It's not complicated. We just have to recognize when we are out of balance, and we have to remember and realize what we're giving up by staying in that state. Because what we're giving up is our awareness of ourselves as this pure consciousness, as the embodiment of infinite possibilities. And we just have to refuse to give that up. And that can be as easy as invoking your deep, soft, and delicious breath. We're going to finish up. I know we're getting close to time. Oh yeah, we're getting close to time. So I wanted to speak for a moment about our dear friend, Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman was a master at being spirit guided. You know, one of the reasons that she is, she's here, you know, one of the reasons she's attending our gatherings, and she is an example, a guide, is that more than almost anyone I can think of that I've read, she has a pure relationship with spirit in which she is attuned. She's attuned to spirit, so much so that the body, the environment, and time are not attractive to her. How she accomplished, 19 trips into slave states, bringing over 300 enslaved people out of slave states. How she accomplished that was through her unconditional mastery of her nervous system. I think I might have said this, but I'll make sure that you know the story now. Harriet Tubman had narcolepsy, what we would now call narcolepsy. She had a traumatic brain injury that she sustained when she stepped between a slave owner and an enslaved person who was escaping. And the slave owner picked up an object and hurled it in the direction of the enslaved person who was running away. And Harriet stepped in between and was struck on the head by this heavy object. And she took months to recover. And after that, she would go into spontaneous sleep states. She never knew when she was going to spontaneously fall asleep. And when she would lead people on the Underground Railroad from, safe house to, a boat here and the back of a wagon there and a barn over here and, the hay field there, she would move from place to place. She never knew when or if she was going to fall asleep. And yet, she never lost a single person on the Underground Railroad. And her vision was always spirit guided. She was always in that open, expanded state. And in that state, even spontaneous sleep didn't occur as a stress. She wasn't. And people, when I read her autobiography, she includes letters from the people who knew her, the abolitionists and lots of people. And all of them remark at her pure, like she never considered that anything would ever go wrong, ever. She just did her thing. So we're being supported, energetically fed, nourished by a master. And that alone, that's a source of enormous love and appreciation. Just that alone. How wonderful is that? So that's worth a deep, soft, and delicious breath all on its own. So we're going to finish up here. So I have asks and tasks for the week. I will be following up in email. I'm breaking down these. So every couple of days, I will ask you to do certain things, because we're going to walk, Harriet has pointed out that all journeys are step by step. All journeys from a feeling of it being in bondage, which fight, flight, freeze is an experience of being in bondage. All experiences of going from bondage to freedom are not instant. They are step by step. We are letting go and we are moving into. And so that's how our journey is. That's how we are navigating this journey, step by step. So Harriet is saying, let's break these ideas down into small, incremental, doable steps that don't cause us to go into the same fight, flight, freeze energy that we're now really understanding is keeping us, keeping our vision very small. So she would always just tell the people she was leading just enough to get them to the next place on the Underground Railroad. In fact, her experience with Spirit showed her just what she needed to do, and she would accomplish that step and then receive instructions. So thank you, Harriet, for guiding and leading and demonstrating that. We're going to be, over the next week until next Thursday, step by step, working with decluttering our space and curating our social media. Those are sources of a lot of triggers for us. We're going to be spending time in sacred space. So sometimes when we let go of stuff, we discover that we have that place that we thought was a mess was actually a sacred space. That's a possibility. And we're going to be giving our attention to our feelings so that we're noticing where we might be experiencing fight, flight, freeze. You know, what are the trigger places? What are the ways in which we're not even consciously going into these states? So we'll be giving our attention to our feelings. And we're going to check in with our practice partner. So if you have a practice partner, recommend that they watch this, and I will post this. I'm going to post this tonight. So you could check in with your practice partner and ask them to watch this, you know, tomorrow or this weekend. And just see what comes up, see what you know your experience is with these ideas. All right, I think yeah, peace, love, and blessings to you and your family. And speaking of you and your family, we're meeting on Tuesday. So we're actually meeting next Tuesday night because next Thursday is Thanksgiving. So I will make, you know, if you can't come on Tuesday night, don't ever worry about it. I will send you the recording. And so peace, love, and blessings. And thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And this is my altar here behind me. I have my Harriet Tubman book here, just holding the space. And I'm going to end our time together by ringing a bell. And if you want to take those deep, soft, delicious breaths, that would be a wonderful way to embody our time together. And I want you to feel that the bell, the sound of that bell, as it extends, it never ends. That bell emanates from the source where it starts, and it just continues outward. And when you invoke your that deep, soft, delicious breath, and you send that feeling from within you, it's just like the bell, that the love that you invoke just keeps spreading. It precedes you wherever you go. It just spreads out. It protects you. You're always walking into the fragrance of your own love and appreciation. And for that, I want to thank you. Thank you for being that in the world. So I'm going to say namaste, ring the bell, be quiet, and then just click off. So I just want to let you know that's what I'm going to do. So namaste. Thank you.